Michael Jordan sees a ref laugh at a teen's injury. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. In the early 1980s, the NBA was a league of established stars. Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar were the faces of the game. But within that landscape, one future icon was quietly beginning his journey. Michael Jordan was not born a legend. He was born in Wilmington, North Carolina, far from the bright lights of the NBA, where basketball was just a game played on the streets and in school gyms. But the drive that would define him was clear from the start. Growing up, Jordan wasn't immediately recognized as the player he would become. In fact, he was cut from the varsity basketball team in high school as a sophomore. That moment, one that would break many aspiring athletes, only fueled his fire. Rather than quit, Jordan took his frustrations to the gym. He worked tirelessly, improving his game, and the next year, he made the varsity team and became the standout player. It was clear then that Jordan didn't take failure lightly. He transformed it into motivation. His rise through high school basketball was only the beginning. By the time he was a senior, Jordan was one of the top high school players in the state, but he still faced skepticism. College recruiters were wary of his size and the unknowns of his potential. Jordan's path to greatness was not paved with easy choices. It was through sheer determination that he secured a scholarship to play at the University of North Carolina under legendary coach Dean Smith. Jordan's college career was marked by moments of brilliance. His defining moment came in the 1982 NCAA championship game, where he hit the game-winning shot against Georgetown. The moment was historic, but it was also a glimpse into what would become his trademark: clutch performances under pressure. That shot solidified Jordan's place as a rising star, though many were still unsure if his talents could translate to the NBA. In 1984, Jordan entered the NBA draft, where the Chicago Bulls selected him as the third overall pick. The Bulls, struggling for relevance in a league dominated by established teams like the Boston Celtics and Los Angeles Lakers, hoped that Jordan could be the answer to their problems. However, the doubts surrounding his potential persisted. Could Jordan's game work in the NBA? Was he tough enough for the rigors of professional basketball? Would he be able to handle the pressure of the spotlight? Jordan's rookie season immediately shattered expectations. He averaged over 28 points per game and was named Rookie of the Year. Yet, despite his individual success, the Bulls were still far from contenders. The team lacked the cohesion and experience needed to compete with the top-tier teams of the league. Jordan could score, but there was more to winning than just putting the ball in the basket. The 1986-87 season saw Jordan take his scoring to another level, averaging an incredible 37.1 points per game, but the team still faltered in the playoffs. Even Jordan, with all his talent, couldn't carry the Bulls to a championship by himself. It became apparent that Jordan needed help. Enter Scottie Pippen, drafted by the Bulls in 1987. Pippen was a lanky forward with a lot of potential, though still raw in his development. While Jordan was already established as a superstar, Pippen's presence was the missing piece for the Bulls' championship hopes. It wasn't just Pippen's defense and versatility, it was his ability to complement Jordan's game that would unlock the Bulls' true potential. Pippen's arrival coincided with a shift in Jordan's mindset. As much as Jordan was known for his scoring, he began to realize that championships weren't won by one player alone. The dynamic duo of Jordan and Pippen would take time to fully mesh, but the foundation was there. Jordan knew he had to evolve, to not only be the league's best scorer but also a better leader and teammate. He worked on his passing, his defense, and his understanding of the game as a whole. But the road to an NBA title wasn't smooth. The Detroit Pistons, known for their tough, physical style of play, loomed large as the Bulls' biggest obstacle in the Eastern Conference. The Pistons, led by Isiah Thomas, were the reigning champions and masters of the bad boy style of basketball, using physicality and psychological warfare to break their opponents. Jordan was the perfect target for their brutal defense, and for the next few seasons, the Pistons proved to be an impenetrable barrier between Jordan and his championship dreams. In 1988, the Bulls met the Pistons in the Eastern Conference Finals. Jordan, who had become a more complete player, gave everything he had. But the Pistons were relentless. They were a step ahead, using their tough tactics to wear down the Bulls mentally and physically. The Bulls were eliminated once again, and while Jordan's individual brilliance was undeniable, it was clear that the Bulls' best player could not carry them alone. Jordan knew this. The next offseason, he dedicated himself to improving his physicality. He added muscle to his frame and worked on his mental toughness, knowing that beating the Pistons required more than just skill. It would take grit, strategy, and a team effort. He was no longer just a scorer for the Bulls, he was the heart of the team. The 1991 season brought a new sense of purpose for Jordan and the Bulls. They had been through their battles, and now they were ready. In the Eastern Conference Finals, the Bulls faced the Pistons again. But this time, the Bulls were different. Jordan had finally found the right balance between scoring, leadership, and defense. With the help of Pippen and others like Horace Grant and John Paxson, the Bulls defeated the Pistons in 4 games. It was a victory not just over a rival but over all the doubt that had followed Jordan throughout his career. That series marked a turning point, but it was still only a prelude to what would come next. The Bulls advanced to the NBA Finals, where they would face the Los Angeles Lakers, a team with their own rich history and a collection of stars. The stage was set for the first of many championships that would define Jordan's career. The finals were a true test of Jordan's ability to perform on the biggest stage. Facing off against Magic Johnson and the Lakers, Jordan didn't just meet the challenge, he exceeded it. He dominated the series, leading the Bulls to a 5-game victory and claiming his first NBA championship. Jordan was named Finals MVP, a title he would claim again and again in the years to come. But for Jordan, that first championship wasn't just about winning. It was about silencing the critics, proving to himself and the world that he had what it took to be the best. It was a declaration: Michael Jordan wasn't just a great player. He was the player who would define an era. As the confetti rained down in Chicago, it was clear that Jordan had arrived. The journey that began in a high school gym in Wilmington had reached its peak, but it was only the beginning of what would become the most iconic career in basketball history. With the championship secured, Jordan's legacy was born, but the story was far from over. The next chapters would be filled with even more drama, rivalries, and triumphs. The road to greatness is rarely a smooth one. For Michael Jordan, the story of his first NBA championship was not the end of his struggles, it was just the beginning of an even more intense and challenging journey. After the 1991 NBA Finals, Jordan's victory over Magic Johnson and the Los Angeles Lakers was a statement. But the quest for multiple championships was far from over. The next obstacle came in the form of the Detroit Pistons, Jordan's most formidable opponent up until that point. Their rivalry would shape Jordan's career, test his resolve, and push him to new heights. The Pistons were the reigning champions, and their defensive style, brutal, physical, and merciless, was designed specifically to stop Michael Jordan. Under coach Chuck Daly, the Pistons became infamous for their bad boys basketball, a strategy that was built around intimidation and dominance. Led by Isaiah Thomas, with players like Bill Laimbeer, Dennis Rodman, and Joe Dumars, the Pistons were not afraid to push the limits of what was acceptable on the court. Their primary mission was to stop Jordan from scoring, and they did it with ferocity. Jordan, who had already earned the reputation of being a prolific scorer, found himself up against a wall every time he faced Detroit. The Pistons' physicality became a mental battle for Jordan. In the 1989 Eastern Conference Finals, the Pistons defeated the Bulls in a grueling 7-game series. For the second year in a row, Jordan's brilliance was overshadowed by the Pistons' defense. Despite his scoring, despite his best efforts, the Bulls couldn't break through. The mental toll of losing to the Pistons was evident. Jordan wasn't just beaten by a team, he was mentally and physically broken by the Pistons' style of play. The loss wasn't just a failure, it was a turning point. Michael Jordan was no longer just a gifted athlete. He was now a player with a singular focus: to defeat the Detroit Pistons. He knew it would take more than just his scoring to overcome the physical barrage the Pistons had unleashed. This was a defining moment in Jordan's career. He had to evolve. He needed to become stronger, smarter, and more resilient. Jordan spent the offseason preparing for the next battle. He transformed his body, focusing on building muscle and endurance. He worked tirelessly on his conditioning and his ability to take hits and still deliver. Jordan's resolve hardened. He was no longer just playing for points, he was playing for revenge. And it wasn't just about getting past the Pistons, it was about breaking their spirit. It was about proving that the bad boys couldn't stop him. The following year, in the 1991 Eastern Conference Finals, the Bulls faced the Pistons once again. This time, there was no question about the outcome. Jordan had evolved as a player, and his newfound strength and leadership had transformed the team around him. The Bulls swept the Pistons in 4 games, a humiliating defeat for a team that had once been invincible. The victory wasn't just sweet for Jordan, it was a statement that he had overcome his greatest obstacle. The Pistons' reign of dominance was over. But the true test was yet to come. The 1991 NBA Finals would be a challenge like no other. The Bulls, fresh off their victory over the Pistons, would face the mighty Los Angeles Lakers once again. This time, however, the stakes were higher. The Lakers were hungry for revenge, and they had the experience to back it up. But Michael Jordan had already proven he could handle pressure. He had done so in the most intense of moments throughout his career. Game 1 of the finals set the tone for what would become an unforgettable series. Jordan dominated the Lakers from the opening tip. His performance was nothing short of spectacular. He scored 36 points, and his ability to control the game from every angle was evident. The Lakers, though experienced and deep, couldn't stop him. Jordan wasn't just scoring, he was dictating the flow of the game. The Bulls came away with a 108-105 victory, and Jordan's performance left the basketball world in awe. The Lakers, led by Magic Johnson, were no strangers to pressure. But they had never faced a player like Michael Jordan before. The series was a showcase of Jordan's immense skill, his scoring, his defense, his leadership. The Bulls would go on to win the series in 5 games, with Jordan earning his first Finals MVP award. But more importantly, the victory marked a shift in the league's hierarchy. The Chicago Bulls were no longer underdogs. They were champions, and Jordan had solidified himself as the undisputed king of the NBA. The 1991 championship, however, was not the culmination of Jordan's career, it was just the beginning. The pressure of being a champion is not just about defending your title, it's about dealing with the expectations that come with it. After Jordan's first championship, the Bulls were expected to win again, and again, and again. But the next challenge would be even more daunting than before. As the Bulls entered the 1992 season, they had the confidence of champions, but they also had the target on their backs. The rest of the league was gunning for them, and every opponent wanted to be the team that knocked off the defending champs. The pressure mounted as the season went on, but Jordan thrived under the spotlight. He knew that being the best meant handling the pressure and never backing down. The 1992 NBA Finals saw the Bulls face the Portland Trail Blazers, a talented team led by Clyde Drexler. Drexler was often compared to Jordan, and some argued that he was just as good, if not better. But Jordan's performance in the finals put that debate to rest once and for all. He was spectacular, dominating every aspect of the game. His performance in Game 1 was legendary. He scored 35 points, but it was his clutch three-pointer in the first half that defined the game. Jordan was unstoppable, and the Bulls would go on to win the finals in 6 games, securing their second consecutive championship. The victory was significant, not just for the title itself, but for the way Jordan had carried the Bulls. He was not just the best player on the team, he was the driving force that propelled them to greatness. His scoring was as prolific as ever, but it was his leadership, his ability to elevate those around him, that made the difference. The Bulls were on top of the basketball world. Jordan's legacy was being written with every game, and he was becoming more than just a basketball player, he was becoming an icon. But as the Bulls celebrated their second consecutive championship, the true nature of Jordan's journey became clear. This wasn't just about winning titles. It was about proving that he was the best, and that no one could take that away from him. By the end of the 1992 finals, Jordan had not only defended his title but had cemented his place as one of the greatest players in the history of the game. But with that greatness came the pressure to sustain it. The challenges were just beginning. The next season, the stakes would be higher than ever. Jordan's quest for greatness wasn't over, and the world was watching, waiting to see what he would do next. The 1990s were a decade dominated by the Chicago Bulls, and Michael Jordan was at the center of it all. But even legends must face the inevitable, a time when their dominance begins to fade. In the case of Jordan, that moment came sooner than anyone expected. It wasn't an injury or a decline in performance, but the personal decision that shook the basketball world. Michael Jordan retired from the game he had mastered at the height of his powers. It was March 1993 when Jordan made the sudden and shocking announcement that he was stepping away from basketball. The reasons were complex. On the surface, it was the emotional toll of the murder of his father, James Jordan, Sr., a tragedy that devastated him personally. The loss of his father was not just a personal grief, it was a profound moment of reckoning. Jordan had always played for his father, and now, with the elder Jordan gone, Michael was forced to confront the emptiness that came with the loss. The death of his father, who had been his biggest supporter, seemed to sap the joy out of the game for Jordan. It was clear that, at that moment, basketball no longer felt the same. At 30 years old, Jordan had achieved everything there was to achieve. 3 championships, 3 finals MVPs, and countless accolades. But at the peak of his career, Jordan walked away from it all. To many, it seemed incomprehensible. How could the greatest player of his generation, at the height of his career, leave the game so abruptly? The answer lay in a need for something more than basketball, a need to step away from the grind, the expectations, and the relentless pursuit of greatness. Jordan's retirement left a void in the NBA. For years, the Bulls had been the league's most dominant team, and Jordan was at the heart of that success. His departure created a power vacuum in the league, and it opened the door for new contenders to emerge. But for the Bulls, it was a painful reality. The team would no longer be the same without their superstar leader, and no one could quite fill the gap that Jordan left behind. During his time away from basketball, Jordan briefly pursued a career in professional baseball. He signed a minor league contract with the Chicago White Sox and played for the Birmingham Barons, a Double-A affiliate. It was an odd chapter in Jordan's life, one that many considered a failure, but in retrospect, it served a purpose. It allowed him to step away from the constant pressure of being the best and explore something different. Baseball was a different kind of challenge, and while Jordan was never a standout player in the sport, the experience gave him perspective. It was also a testament to his relentless drive to master something new, even if the odds were against him. But no matter how far Jordan tried to step away from basketball, the game continued to call him back. The 1994-95 NBA season came and went, and without Jordan, the Bulls still managed to be competitive. But the team was not the same without him, and it was clear that Jordan's absence left a gap that no one could fill. The league continued to move forward, and while players like Shaquille O'Neal, Hakeem Olajuwon, and David Robinson were emerging as the league's new stars, none of them could match the global impact that Jordan had created. In March of 1995, Jordan made an unexpected return. His famous 2-word statement, "I'm back," sent shockwaves through the basketball world. But his return was not without its challenges. Jordan wasn't coming back at 100%. He was rusty, having spent over a year away from competitive basketball. His first few games back were a reminder that even the greatest players need time to get back into rhythm. But even in his early struggles, there was an unmistakable energy. The Bulls were a different team with Jordan back on the floor. His return ignited the team and the city, and the hope for another championship run was reignited. But the road back to the top was not going to be easy. Jordan's return was met with an immediate challenge, one that would test him in ways he hadn't experienced before. The 1995 NBA playoffs would be a brutal test, not only for Jordan's physical readiness but also for his ability to carry a team that was still finding its identity. The Bulls faced the Orlando Magic in the Eastern Conference semifinals, a team that had a new superstar in Shaquille O'Neal and a rising star in Penny Hardaway. The Magic were a formidable team, and they took advantage of Jordan's lack of rhythm and the Bulls' lack of cohesion. They defeated the Bulls in 6 games, and Jordan's performance was under scrutiny. It wasn't the triumphant return everyone had hoped for. For the first time in his career, Jordan faced the sting of failure in the playoffs, and it was a reminder that greatness wasn't guaranteed. The loss was a bitter one, but it also served as a wake-up call. Jordan had come back, but now he needed to prove that he could still be the dominant force he once was. In the offseason, the Bulls made moves to solidify their roster, and Jordan worked tirelessly to get back to his peak form. The following season, the Bulls were a different team, stronger, more cohesive, and more focused. The 1995-96 season would become one of the most defining seasons in NBA history. The team finished the regular season with a 72-10 record, the best in NBA history at that time. Jordan was back to his dominant self, and the Bulls were firing on all cylinders. The 1996 NBA Finals saw the Bulls face off against the Seattle Supersonics, and this time, there would be no failure. Jordan was locked in, and the Bulls were on a mission. They won the series in 6 games, and Jordan was once again named Finals MVP. It was his 4th championship, and it marked the full return of the Jordan we had come to know and admire, the relentless competitor who demanded greatness from his teammates and himself. But the victory was more than just another championship. It was the culmination of a journey. Jordan had faced loss, uncertainty, and failure, but he had come back stronger. The victory was not just a reaffirmation of his skills, it was a testament to his resilience, his drive, and his ability to overcome adversity. The narrative of Michael Jordan's career was no longer just about his incredible scoring ability or his clutch performances. It was about the way he had overcome every obstacle placed in his path. As Jordan lifted the Finals MVP trophy once again, it was clear that his legacy had only grown. The world watched as he celebrated with his teammates, but there was something deeper in his eyes. He had already conquered the basketball world once. Now, he had done it again, and the story of Michael Jordan was far from over. By the mid-1990s, Michael Jordan was no longer just a basketball player, he was a global phenomenon. His influence stretched far beyond the court. With 3 championships in his belt and a dominant performance in the 1996 NBA Finals, it was clear that Jordan was the best to ever play the game. But for all his success, the landscape of the NBA was changing. There was a new generation of stars rising, and among them was one that stood out above the rest, Kobe Bryant. Kobe was the heir apparent, the one who many thought could carry the torch from Jordan's era into the future. But Bryant wasn't just trying to follow Jordan's footsteps, he was trying to forge his own path, while also drawing direct comparisons to the man he idolized. As a teenager in the 1990s, Kobe was already anointed as the next big thing, and he wanted to prove that he could do what Jordan had done, lead his team to championships and dominate the league. The rivalry between Jordan and Kobe was inevitable. Though they played in different positions, the parallels were uncanny. Both were fierce competitors, both had an unyielding work ethic, and both had the mentality that they could not be stopped. While Jordan had carved out his legacy in the 1990s, Kobe's journey in the NBA was just beginning. It wasn't just about who was better, it was about how their careers intertwined, the ways in which one inspired the other, and how their rivalry would come to define the future of the league. Kobe entered the NBA in 1996, drafted by the Charlotte Hornets and immediately traded to the Los Angeles Lakers, the city where he would build his legend. He was young, brash, and hungry. But despite his confidence, Kobe was also realistic. He knew the challenge ahead of him. The Lakers were in the midst of rebuilding, and even though they had the presence of a star in Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe was eager to prove himself. His approach to the game was similar to Jordan's, dedicated to perfection, to constant improvement, and to the desire to be the best. From the moment Kobe arrived in the NBA, comparisons to Michael Jordan began. It was the inevitable outcome of any young, talented shooting guard trying to make his mark in the league at the same time as the greatest player to ever step on the court. Kobe's game, much like Jordan's, was built on isolation, footwork, mid-range jumpers, and relentless drives to the basket. But while Kobe's game was heavily influenced by Jordan, it was also his own. Still, the shadow of Jordan loomed large. Kobe's early years in the league were marked by moments of brilliance and mistakes, much like Jordan's early years in Chicago. The Lakers were in transition, and while Kobe wasn't always the main focus of the team, his potential was clear. But it wasn't until the 1999-2000 season that the rivalry between Kobe and Jordan truly began to take shape. In 2000, the Lakers and Bulls faced off for the first time since Kobe's arrival in the NBA. Jordan was now playing for the Washington Wizards, a far cry from the dominant force he had once been with the Bulls. The matchup was symbolic. It was the passing of the torch, not in terms of a direct transfer of greatness, but rather an acknowledgement that the NBA was evolving. Kobe was the future of the game, and Jordan's time had passed. Still, even at 37 years old, Jordan showed flashes of his old brilliance, and the battle between the two players was a fascinating contrast of past and future. But it wasn't just about the players, it was about the teams they led. The Lakers, with the powerhouse duo of Kobe and Shaq, were on the rise. The Bulls, with Jordan now in a different uniform, were in the midst of rebuilding. But the matchups between the Lakers and Wizards, while far from being the final showdown many hoped for, were a window into how different the league had become. During this period, Kobe was not just a talented young player, he was a man determined to match Jordan's legacy. He spent countless hours working on his game, adopting many of Jordan's habits, and seeking his advice. Jordan, for his part, noticed the similarities in their games and couldn't help but see the rising star in Kobe. But their relationship was not purely mentor and student. It was one of competition, of two men pushing each other, knowingly or unknowingly, to be the best. In the 2002 NBA All-Star Game, Kobe and Jordan had their first head-to-head matchup in a competitive setting. While it wasn't a finals game, it was a glimpse into the future of the NBA, and it was clear that Kobe had arrived. The game ended with a victory for the Western Conference, but it was the performance of Kobe Bryant that stood out. He had 31 points, including a dazzling array of plays that mirrored Jordan's own iconic moves. Jordan, who had long been the player others sought to emulate, now found himself watching a younger version of himself on the floor. It was the beginning of an era that would define the next decade of basketball. Kobe's rise came at a time when the NBA was transitioning from the era of Jordan's dominance into a more diverse landscape of talent. The Lakers would go on to win 3 consecutive championships from 2000 to 2002, with Shaquille O'Neal as the centerpiece, but Kobe was steadily proving himself as the next great player. He was no longer just a young star, he was the future of the Lakers, and his rivalry with Jordan was undeniable. In 2003, Jordan's career came to a close with the Washington Wizards. His final season wasn't marked by the glory of his championship years, but it was still an emotional farewell for a player who had reshaped the entire sport. For Kobe, it was the final sign that the era of Jordan's dominance was over. But even as Jordan stepped away from the game, he knew that his legacy had been firmly established. He had set the standard for excellence, and Kobe Bryant was now the player who would carry the torch. Kobe's rise to prominence wasn't just about his individual success. It was about his relentless pursuit of greatness. And while he never fully admitted it, his rivalry with Jordan was the driving force behind much of his career. He wanted to prove that he could do what Jordan had done, but he also wanted to build his own legacy. In doing so, he became the closest thing the NBA had seen to Jordan since the 1990s. As Kobe began his own championship run, winning 5 titles with the Lakers, his story was a reflection of Jordan's, a tale of hard work, ambition, and an unyielding belief that anything was possible. But while the rivalry was built on respect, it was also about who would come to define the future of the NBA. It was a rivalry that spanned generations, a passing of the torch that didn't come without its share of challenges. For Michael Jordan, watching Kobe Bryant's rise was bittersweet. He knew that the game had changed, but he also knew that the legacy he had built would live on. The rivalry between the two wasn't about animosity, it was about respect, about two of the greatest players to ever touch a basketball and their shared goal to be the best. As the years went on, Kobe would continue to chase his 6th championship, and Jordan's legacy would remain a shadow over every player who followed in his footsteps. The rivalry, defined by both mutual admiration and fierce competition, would inspire a generation of players to reach for greatness. The torch was passed, but the flame would never go out. By the mid-1990s, Michael Jordan's dominance was undeniable. The Chicago Bulls, led by Jordan, had established themselves as a force in the NBA, winning 3 consecutive championships. But with the end of the 1992-93 season came an unexpected turn in the story. Jordan shocked the basketball world by announcing his first retirement from the game. At just 30 years old, the reigning 3-time Finals MVP walked away from the game, leaving the Bulls in a state of uncertainty. Jordan's decision was driven by a combination of factors. The most immediate was the tragic murder of his father, James Jordan Sr., who had been his greatest supporter. The grief from this loss left a hole in Jordan's life that basketball could no longer fill. He needed a break, something to reset his mind and refocus his life. For Jordan, stepping away from basketball was a way of dealing with the emotional pain and finding a new purpose. But even in retirement, Jordan's legacy remained in the hearts and minds of basketball fans. The Chicago Bulls were no longer the team they had been with him at the helm. Without their leader, the Bulls struggled to maintain the same level of dominance. The 1993-94 season was a difficult one, and while Scottie Pippen stepped up in Jordan's absence, it was clear that the Bulls weren't the same without their superstar. It was a transitional period, a time when the NBA began to feel the absence of Jordan's presence. In the summer of 1994, Jordan shocked everyone by announcing his return to the NBA with a simple statement, "I'm back." The world was watching, waiting for Jordan to resume his reign over the league. When Jordan rejoined the Chicago Bulls in March of 1995, the NBA had changed. The landscape was different, and the competition had become fiercer. Teams like the Orlando Magic and the New York Knicks had emerged as strong contenders, but the Bulls had their sights set on reclaiming their crown. Jordan's return brought with it a renewed sense of hope for the Bulls, and they were determined to build a new championship dynasty around him. However, the road to dominance wasn't as straightforward as it had been before. Jordan's return wasn't without its challenges. The Bulls were still finding their rhythm, and it was clear that Jordan's return wasn't going to immediately restore the team to its former glory. The chemistry on the court had to be rebuilt. Jordan had been away for over a year, and the team had been forced to adapt without him. But what separated the greats from the rest was the ability to adapt quickly. Jordan's return energized the team, and the Bulls began to gel once again. One of the most significant changes during this period was the arrival of key players. While the core of the team remained the same, with Jordan, Pippen, and veterans like Tony Kukoc, the Bulls made moves to bring in players who could contribute to their championship aspirations. The addition of Steve Kerr, who would later become known for his clutch shooting in the finals, helped provide the Bulls with a valuable asset off the bench. Additionally, the development of younger players like Ron Harper and Luke Longley gave the Bulls the depth they needed to compete at the highest level. In the 1995-96 season, the Chicago Bulls were ready to reclaim their place at the top of the NBA. Jordan had rediscovered his old form, and the team was stronger than ever. The combination of Jordan's scoring, Pippen's defense, and the added contributions of the supporting cast made the Bulls an unstoppable force. The 1995-96 season would go down in history as one of the greatest seasons ever in NBA history. The Bulls finished with a 72-10 record, the best in NBA history at the time. This wasn't just a dominant team, it was a team with a purpose, with a mission to prove that they were the greatest. In the 1996 NBA Finals, the Bulls faced the Seattle Supersonics, a team led by the dynamic duo of Gary Payton and Shawn Kemp. The Supersonics were no pushovers, but they were no match for the Bulls' firepower. Jordan, who had already claimed 3 NBA championships with the Bulls, was now playing with a renewed sense of purpose. He was more than just a scorer, he was a leader, and his presence on the court elevated everyone around him. The Bulls took down the Supersonics in 6 games, with Jordan being named Finals MVP once again. It was his 4th title, and it marked the beginning of a new era of dominance for the Chicago Bulls. But even as the Bulls celebrated their victory, the challenges weren't over. The 1997-98 season, which would turn out to be the final season of the Bulls' second three-peat, was filled with internal tension. The media had begun to focus on the inevitable end of an era. The tension between head coach Phil Jackson and the front office, combined with the uncertainty surrounding Jordan's future, created a palpable sense of drama throughout the season. The team was on a mission to win one last championship, but there was no guarantee that the pieces would fall into place. The 1997-98 season was full of twists and turns. The Bulls struggled with injuries, and the pressure of living up to their past success began to weigh heavily on the players. But through it all, Jordan remained the focal point of the team. His leadership and ability to rise to the occasion when the stakes were highest were unparalleled. The team fought through adversity, with Pippen dealing with a back injury and key players like Kerr and Rodman stepping up when needed. The playoffs that year were a grueling test of will and determination. In the Eastern Conference Finals, the Bulls faced off against the Indiana Pacers, a team that was hungry to dethrone the champs. The Pacers, led by Reggie Miller, pushed the Bulls to 7 games, but in the end, Jordan's poise and skill were too much to overcome. The Bulls advanced to the NBA Finals, where they would face the Utah Jazz. The 1998 NBA Finals were nothing short of legendary. The Jazz, led by Karl Malone and John Stockton, were a well-coached, disciplined team that posed a serious threat to the Bulls dynasty. The series was intense, with both teams exchanging punches and playing at the highest level. The drama reached its peak in Game 6, when Jordan hit a clutch jumper over Brian Russell with 5.2 seconds left to give the Bulls an 87-86 lead, sealing their 6th championship in 8 years. The shot, which would become known as the last shot, marked the end of an era. Jordan's ability to perform under pressure was the defining characteristic of his career, and his performance in the 1998 Finals was the perfect conclusion to his second run with the Bulls. The 1997-98 season marked the end of the Chicago Bulls dynasty. Jordan's decision to retire for a second time, following the Finals victory, brought closure to one of the most dominant runs in the history of sports. The Bulls had conquered the NBA, and Jordan had once again solidified his place as the greatest player of all time. But even as the championship banners hung in Chicago, the question remained, could anyone fill the void left by Jordan's departure? The answer was clear, no one could. The legacy of Michael Jordan was more than just a series of championships and accolades. It was a mindset, a relentless drive to be the best, and a will to win that would never be duplicated. As the final buzzer sounded in Game 6 of the 1998 Finals, Jordan's legacy was cemented. The Chicago Bulls had won their 6th title, but the greatest legacy of all was the example Jordan set for the generations that followed. His drive, his leadership, and his ability to perform in the most high-pressure moments would continue to inspire basketball players around the world. The Bulls dynasty had come to an end, but the influence of Michael Jordan would remain for years to come. The story of the Chicago Bulls' dominance was not just a tale of championships. It was a story of a man who would stop at nothing to achieve greatness. The story of Michael Jordan's Chicago Bulls is one of unrelenting dominance, defined by the pursuit of greatness, but even the greatest dynasties can fall. After their historic second three-peat in 1998, the Bulls were on top of the basketball world. Jordan had cemented his legacy as the greatest player ever, having led the team to 6 championships. But with success came inevitable change, and with the end of the 1998 NBA Finals, Jordan's second retirement marked the end of an era. However, the impact of Jordan's departure left not only the Bulls but the entire NBA wondering what would come next. The immediate aftermath of Jordan's final shot, his 6th and last championship with the Chicago Bulls, was a somber realization for the city of Chicago and for the NBA. Michael Jordan's decision to retire for the second time left a vacuum. For the Bulls, it was the end of their golden age. The franchise was about to enter an unfamiliar territory, rebuilding. In the locker rooms, on the court, and in the stands, there was a sense of uncertainty. The team was no longer the powerhouse it had once been, and the next chapter of the team would have to be written without the greatest player the sport had ever known. For Chicago, the loss of Jordan felt like more than just the absence of a player. He had been the heart and soul of the team for nearly a decade. His leadership had guided the Bulls through difficult times and carried them through the most challenging playoff runs. With Jordan gone, the core of the team, Pippen, Rodman, and the supporting cast, was left in a precarious situation. The Bulls had won championships, but what would they be without their leader? After Jordan's second retirement, the Bulls were left in disarray. The team's roster had been built around Jordan, and without him, there was a sense that the pieces no longer fit. While players like Scottie Pippen and Steve Kerr were still contributors, they were no longer surrounded by the same talent or leadership. The Bulls were still a good team, but they were no longer championship contenders. The franchise had lost its identity. The once mighty Bulls, who had dominated the NBA for nearly a decade, were now faced with the reality of rebuilding, and it was clear that the next few seasons would be challenging. The NBA itself was in a period of transition as well. Jordan's departure left a significant void in the league. The NBA had been built around his charisma, his unparalleled skill, and his ability to sell the game to a global audience. Without Jordan, the NBA needed new faces to carry the sport into the new millennium. There were plenty of stars who had been building their legacies, but none could match the global appeal of Jordan. The Los Angeles Lakers, with the emergence of Kobe Bryant and the dominance of Shaquille O'Neal, were poised to fill the void left by Jordan. The Lakers became the team of the late 1990s and early 2000s, capturing multiple championships. While Kobe Bryant had been compared to Jordan from the very start of his career, it wasn't just his scoring ability that drew those comparisons. It was his mentality, his work ethic, his relentless pursuit of perfection that mirrored Jordan's approach to the game. Still, Bryant was his own player, with his own career to forge. As the new millennium began, the Bulls, like the rest of the NBA, were left trying to adjust to a world without Jordan. They had to redefine themselves, but they didn't have the pieces to return to championship contention. In the seasons following Jordan's departure, the Bulls fell into mediocrity. They struggled in the draft, making decisions that would set the team back even further. The team's fortunes began to decline, and it was clear that they were in the early stages of a rebuilding process that would take years. It was a stark contrast to the championship glory they had known in the 1990s. Meanwhile, the Lakers, led by Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant, were making their own run toward dominance. The Lakers captured 3 consecutive championships in 2000, 2001, and 2002, led by the dynamic duo. O'Neal, dominant in the paint, and Bryant, a versatile scorer, provided the kind of 1-2 punch that few teams could match. The Lakers were a formidable force in the league, and many began to wonder if the Lakers dynasty could rival the success that Jordan had enjoyed with the Bulls. However, the 2000s were also a time when the NBA saw new contenders rise. Teams like the San Antonio Spurs, led by Tim Duncan and coached by Greg Popovich, also became a constant in the title hunt. The Spurs' fundamentally sound play and the leadership of Duncan, who was arguably one of the most consistent and dominant players of his generation, allowed them to build their own dynasty. The Spurs would go on to win 5 championships between 1999 and 2014, providing the league with a new type of championship pedigree. But for all the success the Lakers and Spurs had, there was still a sense that the NBA was searching for its next global superstar, its next Jordan. While Bryant continued to grow into a legend of his own, no one could replicate Jordan's appeal. He had changed the game. His marketability, his influence, and his presence had transcended basketball. His shoes, his commercials, his worldwide fame, all of it made Jordan more than just a player. He was a cultural icon, and as time went on, it became clear that there would never be another Michael Jordan. The fall of the Bulls was not just about the end of their championship run. It was about the shift in the NBA as a whole. Jordan's departure marked the end of an era, and the league had to adapt. The 1990s had been defined by Jordan's dominance, but now, with the Bulls dynasty in the rearview mirror, the NBA needed new teams, new stars, and new stories to drive the sport forward. The Chicago Bulls had set the standard, but the game had changed. As the Lakers, Spurs, and other teams began to rise, Jordan's legacy still loomed large, but the landscape of the NBA was rapidly evolving. For the Bulls, the future would be uncertain for years to come. The championship banners would remain, but they would serve as a reminder of a time long past. The Chicago Bulls were a franchise that had known only one type of success, the kind that came with Michael Jordan. Without him, the team struggled to find its identity. The rebuild would take time, and even as the years passed, it became clear that the franchise would never be the same. But for the rest of the NBA, Jordan's absence marked the beginning of a new era. Teams like the Lakers, Spurs, and others carried the torch for the next generation. The league was still in the process of transitioning to a new kind of basketball, one that had less to do with individual dominance and more with team play. While the league no longer had a single, all-encompassing superstar like Jordan, it had become more dynamic and diverse. There were more players, more teams, and more stories to follow. The league had moved on, but Jordan's legacy would remain the benchmark for greatness. His time as the centerpiece of the NBA was over, but his influence could still be felt across the game. The fall of the Bulls was more than just the end of a dynasty, it was the beginning of the next chapter in the NBA's evolution. After Michael Jordan's second retirement from basketball in 1999, the world was left with an undeniable void. The Chicago Bulls, without their star player and leader, entered an era of rebuilding. With no clear path to future success, the franchise found itself mired in mediocrity. The team struggled to find an identity post-Jordan, and fans and analysts alike were left wondering how long it would take for the Bulls to return to their former glory. Meanwhile, the NBA continued to evolve, and other teams like the Los Angeles Lakers, led by Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal, took center stage. But even in the face of a changing NBA, one fact remained: Michael Jordan was still the measuring stick of greatness. Jordan's decision to retire for the second time had been driven by a mixture of personal and professional factors. But even in retirement, Jordan's impact on the NBA remained profound. His brand had become a global phenomenon, and his legendary status was unmatched. His absence on the court was felt by fans, players, and the league as a whole. As the years passed, rumors began to swirl. The basketball world speculated about a potential return. Jordan had never truly said goodbye to the game, and even after his two retirements, his competitive fire seemed to still burn. The first hint of his comeback came in 2001. Jordan, now in his late 30s, made the surprise announcement that he would return to the NBA, not with the Chicago Bulls, but with the Washington Wizards. The announcement shocked the basketball world. Was this really happening? Could the 38-year-old Jordan still perform at a high level after being away from the game for 3 years? For the Washington Wizards, Jordan's signing was an opportunity to bring back the spotlight. The team had been struggling, and they hoped that Jordan's return would give them a boost both on and off the court. While the Wizards weren't contenders for the championship, adding Jordan to their roster was a calculated gamble. No one could question Jordan's ability to still sell tickets and make the team relevant. But the real question was, could Jordan still play at a high level? Jordan's first season with the Wizards was a roller coaster. While he showed flashes of the same brilliance that made him a legend, it was evident that Father Time had begun to take its toll. He was no longer the explosive, athletic player he had been in his prime. Still, Jordan was far from a shadow of his former self. He averaged 22.9 points per game during the 2001 to 2002 season, a testament to his skill and basketball IQ. He could still score, still dominate in the clutch, but the consistency of his play was not what it had been. The Wizards were not a championship-caliber team, and it became clear that Jordan wasn't coming back for titles. He was back for something more: redemption. Throughout his second stint with the Wizards, Jordan faced a series of challenges. He was not only dealing with the physical limitations of aging but also the pressure of living up to the impossible standard he had set during his first career with the Bulls. Fans were eager to see if the player who had once been synonymous with greatness could still compete at an elite level. Could Jordan still lead a team, even though he was no longer in his prime? One of the most defining moments of his return came in the 2002 to 2003 season. Jordan, despite his aging body, played with the same fierce competitiveness that had propelled him through his first career. But the writing was on the wall. His body was beginning to break down, and the Wizards were far from being true contenders. However, Jordan's influence on the court and in the locker room remained invaluable. His leadership was undeniable. Even though he couldn't carry the Wizards the way he had carried the Bulls, he was still a player others looked up to. His passion for the game and his dedication to winning were infectious. Jordan's return wasn't just about proving he could still play, it was about proving something to himself. The narrative surrounding Jordan was always that he was unbeatable, the greatest ever to play the game. But when he stepped away from the game for the second time, he left a question mark on his legacy. Could he still perform at the highest level, or had his time passed? For Jordan, returning was a way of answering that question. The 2003 season marked the end of his second stint in the NBA. After a year filled with both success and frustration, Jordan announced that he would retire for a third and final time. His career had come full circle. Despite no longer being in his prime, Jordan had still managed to show that he was capable of greatness, albeit in a different way. He was no longer the player who could dominate on a nightly basis, but he was still Michael Jordan, the player whose mere presence could elevate a team and bring excitement to the game. He finished his NBA career with 32,292 points, solidifying his place as one of the greatest basketball players of all time. Jordan's final years in Washington, while not as glamorous as his Bulls days, were a reminder of his legacy. His decision to return and finish his career with the Wizards was one that was largely underappreciated. He wasn't playing for championships. He wasn't even playing for personal glory. He was playing because he loved the game and because he wanted to prove that, even at an older age, he could still be the best. The fact that he played at such a high level at his age, after everything he had accomplished, spoke volumes about his character and his love for the game. After his third retirement, Jordan walked away from basketball for good. His final departure wasn't as celebrated as his first, but it was just as impactful. He had answered all the questions about his ability to compete at the highest level. He had shown that, even in the twilight of his career, he could still perform and still influence the game. But perhaps more importantly, his return had proved something to himself. He was still the greatest, regardless of age or circumstances. While Jordan's second stint with the Wizards wasn't filled with championships, it was filled with moments of brilliance that reaffirmed why he had been considered the greatest player of all time. He didn't need to win another title to cement his legacy. The fact that he could still play at such a high level, after all the challenges he had faced, was a testament to his greatness. The final chapter of Jordan's playing career may not have been filled with the same drama as his first, but it was equally important. His return to the NBA was about redemption, not only for himself but for the game of basketball. Even after stepping away, Jordan remained the measuring stick for greatness in the sport, and his legacy continued to inspire future generations of players. Jordan's impact on the game was never just about the titles or the individual accomplishments. It was about his approach to the game, his competitive spirit, and his ability to elevate everyone around him. His return to the NBA, although short-lived, was a reminder that the heart of a champion never fades. Michael Jordan's journey through the NBA was more than just a career. It was a cultural phenomenon, a testament to ambition, resilience, and the pursuit of greatness. His story had been one of overcoming obstacles, silencing critics, and proving time and again that he was the best, on and off the court. But as Jordan's third retirement came to a close, there was a sense of closure that had been missing for many years. His final moments on the basketball court didn't need a grand finale or another championship. His legacy had already been solidified. Yet, the end of his playing career opened the door to a new chapter, one where his impact on the sport would extend far beyond the game itself. After leaving the Washington Wizards, Jordan transitioned into the world of ownership, further solidifying his connection to the game he had once dominated. He became part owner and eventually the majority owner of the Charlotte Hornets, a team that had struggled in the standings. While he couldn't play anymore, Jordan's influence on the game remained. He poured his energy into building a team, offering guidance to young players, and continuing to shape the future of basketball. Jordan's influence extended well beyond the court. The impact he had on the game's culture, the global reach of the NBA, and the way basketball was marketed would be his true legacy. His Air Jordan brand, a collaboration with Nike, transcended basketball, becoming a symbol of success, style, and perseverance. The Air Jordan sneaker line became iconic, reaching into pop culture, fashion, and beyond the sports world. Jordan became a global figure. He was not just a player, but a symbol of what could be achieved through hard work and determination. But what made Jordan truly great was not just his ability to perform on the court, it was the way he elevated those around him. Players, coaches, and fans all recognized that Michael Jordan was not just about individual achievement. He was about pushing everyone to be their best. His drive was infectious. His standards were the highest, and he expected nothing less from those around him. Players who were once role players became key contributors because of Jordan's leadership. Teammates like Scottie Pippen, Steve Kerr, and others flourished under his mentorship. Even his rivals, like Kobe Bryant, saw Jordan as the bar to strive for. His impact on their careers was undeniable. Bryant, who had modeled his game after Jordan's, would go on to become one of the greatest players in NBA history, continuing Jordan's legacy through his own work ethic and competitive fire. Jordan's return to the game, even if it wasn't as a player, continued to shape the league. His investment in the Hornets allowed him to still play a crucial role in the sport. But while his time as a player had ended, Jordan's presence was still felt across the basketball world. He was not just a former champion, he was a symbol of what basketball could be. His relentless pursuit of excellence set the tone for generations to come. The 2000s and 2010s saw the NBA continue to evolve, and while Jordan was no longer actively playing, his legacy remained a powerful force. The NBA had become more international, with players from all corners of the globe coming into the league. Stars like LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Stephen Curry emerged as the new faces of the NBA. The league had diversified, with different styles of play taking center stage, and yet, Michael Jordan's shadow still loomed large over it all. His 6 championships, 5 MVP awards, and countless unforgettable moments set the standard by which every future player would be measured. LeBron James, the player most often compared to Jordan, began to carve out his own legacy in the NBA. The debate about who was the greatest player of all time would likely never be settled. But what mattered most was the way Jordan's impact on the game transcended any one player or generation. It wasn't about being the best player in history, it was about the way Michael Jordan changed the game forever. Jordan's competitive spirit, his approach to the game, and his tireless work ethic inspired a new wave of athletes, not just in basketball, but across all sports. Young athletes looked up to him, not only because of his achievements, but because of the way he approached his craft. He was never satisfied, never content with just being good enough. His relentless drive to improve, to push himself beyond his limits, became the blueprint for future generations of athletes. His mentality, often referred to as the Jordan mentality, became a mindset that athletes from all walks of life adopted. It was about always striving for greatness, never accepting defeat, and believing that anything was possible. In his later years, Jordan also began to reflect on his journey. He had gone through personal and professional ups and downs, from his father's tragic death to his brief stint in baseball, and eventually his return to the NBA and retirement. Through it all, he had maintained his status as the greatest basketball player the world had ever seen. But for Jordan, the greatest triumphs were not just the championships or accolades. It was the moments that defined his legacy. The game-winning shots, the fierce rivalries, the way he inspired an entire generation to never give up, those were the true measures of his greatness. Jordan's influence wasn't limited to basketball. His cultural impact shaped how athletes approached their careers, how they marketed themselves, and how they engaged with their fans. The brand that Jordan built was more than just about shoes or endorsements. It was about the mindset of an athlete who believed that success was not given, but earned. Jordan's legacy was about much more than the basketball court, it was about what it meant to be great. As Jordan moved into his later years, his legacy continued to grow. His impact on the NBA, on the game of basketball, and on sports culture as a whole became undeniable. He had set the standard for excellence, and while future generations of players would come and go, his place in history was secure. In the end, Michael Jordan's legacy is about more than just the championships or the records. It's about the mindset, the approach, and the passion he brought to the game. His story will forever be one of triumph, resilience, and inspiration. He didn't just change the game, he transformed the world's perception of what an athlete could achieve. Jordan was more than a player. He was a legend, a global icon, and the standard by which greatness is measured. As the years go on, the story of Michael Jordan will continue to inspire. Young players will look up to him, fans will reminisce about his greatest moments, and the NBA will continue to honor the legacy of the man who changed basketball forever. The world may have moved on, but Michael Jordan will always be a symbol of what it means to be the best.